Testing, testing. All right now. Welcome to the Indian Wells Valley Board of Directors Finance Committee meeting. It is now 3 p.m. and I'm calling the meeting to order. So with that, we'll go on to committee of public comments. Is there anybody online? Anything from the committee? Move on to fraud risk discussion. Anything going on?
We have nothing to report.
Thank you very much. GA imported water costs. Discuss imported water costs, potential impact to customers' bills. We talk about that all the time. I believe the latest, and I'll say this because it is out in the public, was how much according to their article? 2,100, and the GA has come out with their costs.
Yeah, it was under $3,000. I don't remember exactly what
Okay.
it was, but their assertion is that recycled water would be significantly more expensive than imported water, and we believe that we've done a really good job of calculating what imported water pipeline costs would be, and how, even to the point where we've made some estimates of how that cost might get spread to our customers and on the tax base. And if we can get the city to agree to what the GA sort of proposed, which is that we take over a recycled water project, we're going to go down that same path and have the same company use the same methodology to develop similar cost comparisons, so that we have the ability to, definitively sort of compare these costs in a much more effective way. I see the GA has put numbers out, but I can't find any documentation on their website or elsewhere that sort of says where those numbers were generated. I'd like to just point out that, we've gone to great effort to try to hire professionals who really do this for a living, who have a great understanding of what these kind of projects cost, and so that we can really, have the very best estimates. No estimate is perfect, but, we're going to get the very best estimates we can so that we can make the best decisions.
And I'm going to go on record, and I say it over again, and I'll say it to the mayor, I'll say it to the city council, I'll say it to the GA. Until you can produce an independent cost analysis and economic impact, then don't be talking to us about cost numbers. We've gone and got an independent firm to take numbers that they had, filled in some blanks that weren't there, and did an independent cost analysis of the project, including the impact on the community in operational costs. I have yet to see that from the GA. And I'm not bad-mouthing anybody like I promised I would, but this is the fact. If they ever produce something like that, then maybe we can talk real numbers. And that's really all I got to say about it. How about you, Stan? You want to chime in on this one before we move on? Imported cost, water costs? You have anything to say except, I don't know where they're coming.
I'm tired of talking about it.
Yeah, I mean,
I think we belabored this to a point
Yeah.
where it's ridiculous. We've already come out and said, we're not going to do it.
right, I'm not going to do it. And you produce something that's independent analysis, and maybe we can talk, but I haven't seen it, so you're right, I'm done talking about it. All right, anything else? Nobody on the phone. Goodness, darn. All right. Number 5, fourth quarter 2024 investment reports.
Okay, yeah, so this is the quarterly report for the end of the calendar year. It shows where our different funds are located. Essentially, our unrestricted fund balance of 9.1 million and restricted of 5.3. That restricted, for the most part, is the bond rep funds for the project for Springer. So for a total of 14,461,000.
Okay. I'm just looking at some of the reserve amounts.
I've got at least one or two questions.
Please do.
If you want to go first, that's fine.
No, go right ahead.
I'm curious, what's the difference between the restricted that is on the bottom, not the top? On the bottom, the restricted items in column 1 versus the restricted items in column 2.
So they're not restricted in column 1. Those are designations. Those are where the board says, this is where I'd like to put this money. At any time, they can change their mind and move it somewhere else. Restriction is based on law that those funds can only be used for specific purposes.
Okay, well, when I look at it, I see line item 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and item 10 as being the rate emergency reserve. And then items 6, 7, 8, and 9 don't really address the rate fee or aren't, or at least I don't see how they can. Anything that is non-spendable, we don't, well, part of it's semantics, all right. First place, between items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, those are all water district allocated. That is, we can, if we wanted to allocate them differently, we could. It's just a pot of money.
Yes.
And those are the first 5. And then item 10 is what's left over from the total reserve that we haven't allocated. But what I don't understand is items 6, 7, 8, and 9, and how those are in any way part of our reserve.
I'm trying to understand the question, except maybe defining each of those for Stan might help. For instance, I can see prepaid customer connection fees are prepaid, so you can't really do much with them because they got to sit in a fund somewhere, and they're
We have
considered
to
capital.
recognize them till they're used.
Right. Post-retirement health benefits, that's assigned, but it has to sit somewhere. It's not
Oh, it
restricted.
has to sit somewhere.
Yeah. I'm not sure what you're asking,
yeah.
Stan. I'm
Oh,
confused.
oh,
Yeah, if I'm confused, I'm,
When I subtract items 6 through 9 from the 9.15, I come up with $8,031,000. My feeling is that is our real reserve, because we can't modify anything that's non-spendable.
So,
And I'm assuming that the post-retirement health benefits, Kern County, it says assigned, but I'm assuming that's kind of like an escrow
No.
account where we're putting money aside to pay Kern County.
But we're putting money aside in a Kern County deposit account for retiree health benefits.
Okay, so we can't spend that either. We have the cash in our account,
Right.
but we can't spend it for something else.
You could, you wouldn't want to, but you could.
Well, yeah, that's my point.
Yeah.
Is the only real true reserve are items 1 through 5 and 10, and they come up with 8,031,000 rather than 9 million. And then I went back and I looked at prior quarterly. Let's go all the way back to the start of the fiscal year, and at that point in time, that what I consider the unrestricted part of that first line reserve was $8,063,000. So basically, the change between the start of the fiscal year and now is we've gone down about $30,000, which means it's pretty stable in my mind.
well, I need to stop it. What are we trying to accomplish here? I'm not sure what you're saying.
Well, what I'm trying to do is figure out what our real reserve is.
Well, that is our real reserve.
Pardon?
That is the real reserve.
Well, no.
I think what he's
this
trying to
no,
say
this
is, how much of the real reserve can the board actually make a decision on how they want to spend it? So
Right.
if I can try to say this in a different way that might be more understandable to Ron. So the discussion we're having is, I believe that the board has set targets for how much money we should have for capital improvements and sort of what percentage of vehicle replacement and computer equipment and emergency reserve committed, alternate water supply, I believe the board sort of set targets for us. Is that correct, Ty? At some point in the
Yes,
past?
yes, they have
Okay.
set targets for different.
Well,
So
the
let me-
emergency reserve is set by We have to keep a certain amount of emergency reserve.
So let me finish. So when you
Yeah.
get down to that number 10, according to what Ty told me before, those first five are in pretty good shape with respect to what the board would like to see. But when you get down to the emergency reserve uncommitted in line 10, that 1.382 million, the board would like that to be significantly higher, upwards of, the target that the board has set for us to have is $10 million.
That's
So-
the first line, for the first line that we had
That would be
7.
For the first line.
Yes,
Capital improvement replacements,
Yeah.
yeah.
we've set that high.
Yeah, so I think what Stan is saying is that the board has the ability to decide to spend some of that money or decide to not save that money. I think as the general manager, what I would say is that, well, I wouldn't disagree with the board saying maybe we want to adjust a $10 million target to a $5 million target, that there's some risk with that. I think we're not, if we were at or above sort of the targets that had been set in the past, I would have a lot more comfort saying, let's reallocate or reuse money somewhere else. But given that we're considerably short of what the board would like to see there, I think we're on a good path and we should continue to try to build those up over time. There's an argument, and I think maybe Stan is trying to argue that we should look at like, what is that total reserve and what's it for? And we can have those discussions, but those are pretty in-depth and detailed discussions of why we have something different for, say, vehicle replacement. Why is that separate than emergency reserve, and what is it for, and how do we use it? Those are pretty lengthy and detailed discussions about how much do we want to set aside, and we can do that if that's the wish of the board.
Absolutely not. This stuff's decided by our finance department. It's here for a particular reason, whether it's to track it a certain way or to make sure what we have that's committed, assigned or not assigned. This is for financial reasons. This is what our CFO feels is best. And if this
Right,
is what
but-
you feel is best the way to present it, then I agree 100%. If
So
you think,
presentation, yes.
Yeah.
And like I said, we broke it down into the different reserves that the board has set. Not that we
Right.
necessarily meet all of them.
Yeah.
Because we don't meet the capital improvement. But you do report on this based on unrestricted and restricted. Unrestricted, in an emergency, you can use any dollar in there that you want to.
right, anywhere. If the board says,
May not- Yeah,
empty this, do it somewhere else.
right. It's unadvisable on a couple of those items, but you could use any dollar in there for anything. As far as restricted, those are ones that are legally
Right.
connected to certain projects.
And that's why I see it, that you have it broken down in a way, because if we said, okay, we want you to take a whole bunch of this designate, unrestricted and spend it somewhere else, then your obligation would come, so wait a minute. We don't want to touch post-retirement health benefits. We don't want to touch prepaid customer connection fees because those are going to go into paid eventually. So you're going to be telling us yes or no on those things.
Right.
I don't see where we're going here. We're talking nomenclature. We're talking the way that our finance department does things. I don't think, I think, I appreciate what you say, George, but I think what you're saying, if the board wants to, there's certain things we have control over in terms of saying we would like this particular reserve to be a certain amount, like we did with capital improvements many years ago. So I'm not sure.
Okay,
Do
okay,
you want to
let
move
me-
it somewhere,
let
Stan?
me- Yeah. let
I mean,
me-
he could
let
give
me-
it as one number.
No, actually, I'm going to a point here.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to clarify the things like the prepaid connection fees. Now, I've always been assuming that we cannot touch those legally for anything other than a capital improvement. Are you saying that we could pay salaries with that?
You could, you don't want to, because it's not technically earned cash
Well,
yet.
yeah, that's my point.
You would be liable to refund it
Okay.
if there's someone,
Okay, well, okay, then if we're assuming that we can actually use any of those monies any way we want to, then I would agree that 9.1 is our unrestricted, maybe not nice, but unrestricted balance. Okay, so then what I'm looking at is one of the things the board and George needs is a way of looking at long-term as we're going along, where are we sitting, all right, in terms of our budget and how much money we have. And what I'm saying is, I think that looking at this number, 9.1 million, and seeing how it fluctuates, tells us how we're doing relative to the year spending. Like right now, between the start of the year and now, we started at 9.15 million and we're now at 9.15 million. That started a year. I went back to June, the end of June, all right, two quarterly reports ago. So what's saying is that currently the money that we have in the unrestricted reserve is the same as we had before. So that tells me we're in pretty good shape financially.
I believe the only money that we approved for payment, we took something out of alternate water supply to pay for one of those engineering projects, correct? Just recently, in fact, a few months ago.
I don't know that we've started billing.
Yeah, that may have,
We haven't pulled that out yet.
You haven't pulled it out
We
yet?
haven't billed. The one item out of restricted is the 550,000 for those Mach 10 meters. So that's in restricted funds. 'cause
That was
a
restricted,
specimen
though.
district,
Okay.
yeah, But
Yeah.
all right.
Okay, so now to try to expand on that point, using this number to tell us how we are in terms of all of our financial health, if you go back to the start of the budget year, we actually budgeted $1 million in the black. That is, when we set up the budget, we were intending to spend $1 million less than we brought in. That was what we
Is that
agreed
correct,
to,
Ty?
right?
3.
Okay.
Yeah,
3?
yeah.
I remember, well, whatever,
Yeah.
whether it be 1 million or 1.3
Yep.
million. At this point in time, 6 months into the year, I guess what I'm thinking is that our reserve, our unrestricted reserve, if indeed we're halfway through the year, we expect it to be 1 million or 1.3 million in the good, then instead of being just a straight line, it ought to have gone up by $500,000 or $600,000.
Yeah.
Which tells me that we may be, even though we're doing good from an overall standpoint, and that we're not in the red. For sure, we are not on budget, because if we were on budget and everything was linear, which of course it isn't. We know nothing is uniform and it's not linear, but we're not $500,000 or $600,000 increased in our unrestricted budget. And I guess what I'm looking for is a way of telling the board, and especially the finance committee, or having a means, a tool to tell George when we go into closed session, when the board asks him for something that we can't afford, how does he respond and what tool does he use to tell us whether or not we have the money? So that's where I'm going with this, and I'm going to be following this in the future quarterly reports just to see whether or not what I think ought to happen happens.
But
If that makes any sense.
I want to make a comment here. First of all, the tool is the budget. But when it comes to the expense budget, there is a tool, which is by line item, certain departments, certain things that said, this is how much money we want for the coming year. There's the tool that you have. If for some reason that George feels he needs to overspend one of those, he's got two choices. One is to take it, say, which other department can give up that money to move over here? Or do I want to touch some of this money that's being put aside in the reserves to use? That's a pretty good tool. So his choice is, okay, operations needs an extra $800,000, but running the offices, we could give up $800,000. Of course, I'm being facetious and not money. And that's the tool he can use, and that's how you use a budget. You look at, where do I stand in these expense items, and who's way overspending and who's not overspending? Is there money I want to cut back? Is there money I want to move around? If it doesn't exist within the expense budget, then it's going to have to come from somewhere. Just like when we talked about, there was money that was in the expense budget for that 500,000, whatever. And then that now becomes a decision that has to come out of the reserve somewhere. And as to where it comes out of the reserve in obviously you'd come to the board, we need to take out the reserve. And then Ty is going to probably make a decision with George, is where's the best line item to take it from? And that's the tools that you have. I'm not sure what other tools he needs, but that's my opinion.
You know, what I'm saying is I think there might be another tool that might be just as good or better.
Okay.
And what I want to do is follow that throughout the year and try to verify whether or not my assumption has got any value or not.
Okay, and now I'll just say this, I think that moving forward, my recommendation, of course, is if there's a decision where, for whatever reason, an unexpected expense comes up, that I would like Ty fully involved in all discussions with that, whether that be in closed session or open
Yeah.
session.
Now,
E-
we put
exactly.
George in a bad spot a couple times, so we
Okay.
want to avoid that.
Well, I'm not so, I don't know. I mean, you're always in a bad spot when you're looking for money that you don't have budgeted. And then you're looking at a reserve that we've already dipped into some, especially the one that concerns me is the capital improvement one. Because we know that where we wanted to put that and we're not getting, we have a long way to go.
That's when we had to, after the earthquake, we had to rebuild.
That's right,
those
yeah.
things
And those kind of things happen. And so again, I'm not, know what tools you're looking for or what tools you think you need. But I would not sit here and advocate changing anything the way that Ty is doing his job with this and as well as advising the general manager on expenditures and finances and such, unless he felt it was necessary. And then at that particular point, if it's a major change, then it has to come to the board.
And we do have a tool, the rate study sort of talks about what our reserve should look like over time. And what you'll see is, you know, when we went through that rate study, there was a, Ty, correct me if I was wrong, it was kind of flat line for a little bit and then it begins increasing over time. And the rate study, you know, what we planned was to build a new rate structure that over time would increase our reserves. Is that correct, Ty?
Yeah, to hit those goals that the board has, not within 5 years, because we're not, that would be a huge.
Yeah, it's going to be more
We
like
can't-
10
We can't
years.
afford to fix all that in 5 years,
Yeah.
but it moves us in the right direction.
We get close in the 10 years.
Right. And as I understand it, if I go through these reserves, and I don't want to belay this, capital improvements was set by the board based on, I believe, one well, one tank, one pump, if I'm not mistaken, was the main thing. Vehicle replacement is set by staff basing on your historical knowledge of vehicle requirements.
That one's actually set by the board as well.
But I don't know that we said, I think you recommend it, and we agree with it. I don't think we sit here and say you need to replace 2 trucks for backhoes and.
No, I think it was just a dollar amount that. was
Yeah,
decided.
yeah, exactly. And you justify it in terms of vehicles. Computer equipment, sort of the same thing. Emergency reserves, there's what is the recommended amount we keep for, because that's for paying.
6 months of operation.
6 months of operations. That's sort of set by industry standards, I guess you can call it, or accounting standards. Alternate water supply, that's set by the board.
Wasn't
Because
the alternate water supply, there was some specific amount of month or.
per month that
it's
we
supposed to be
agreed to
paid.
take out, right? Yeah.
Okay.
And then when you get to the others, miscellaneous capital, customer deposits, prepaid connections, post-retirement, and emergency reserve, that is a financial means for presenting things, as I see it. So I think I know what you're saying, Stan, but I'm still not sure. I think all the tools are there, and if you'd read everything, I can, yeah.
If the only resolution I could find in our archives was Resolution 13-8. And it talks in general about the same thing.
Mhm.
Doesn't provide numbers. Now, I know I've seen numbers since then. I guess I'm not sure that it ever became a resolution.
Which one was that? Is that the one on
We
the,
probably did
capital-
approve a number of things, and I'm sure
right?
that one of them was like a complete new well.
Yeah, that was the capital
two,
improvement one. New
uh,
well, new pump, new tank.
Yeah, right,
Was
reservoir.
That was the, yeah,
Right.
reservoir.
And we're well below that
Yeah.
now. But this, the 1308 is the actual resolution that I could find, unless there's a newer one.
For which one?
Shai, are you aware?
Is that one specific for the capital?
This is the resolution of the Indian Wells Valley Water District, current in San Bernardino County, California, establishing financial reserve policies.
Yeah, there's a newer one that addresses specifically the capital reserve.
Okay, could you get that to the
Mhm.
board? I couldn't find it anywhere on the internet or the website. But generally, that's what it says.
Okay.
I would agree. And I'm just looking for the best way possible for us, the best tool possible for us to be able to determine where we are standing relative to our budget, and whether or not if we have an emergency or not an emergency, because obviously if there's an emergency, we spend our reserve. That's what it's for.
Yeah, you can use, if there's a real
But
serious
if-
emergency, you
if
can use it
there's-
all.
If there's
Yeah.
I want to have, then we need to look at a little more depth, saying, what's our position, what's our status, and can we do this without going too deeply into the reserves? So I think probably it's time we moved on.
Okay, thank you. All right.
You're welcome.
All right. Now I lost my agenda. Oh, here it is. All right, on to number 6, financial statements. Where are we, Ty, on this one? Here we are.
So this is the revenues versus expenditures through January. I did add the column of the 2025 budget, so you can see what the total budget, overall budget
Okay.
is. With the year-to-date budget and the actuals. Actuals to date, we're at 10,200,000 for revenue, which is 1.3 million over the budget. Expenditures are also over budget, 11,049,000, but only 573 over budget. Most of that being the increase in GA fees due to increased pumping.
Right.
So the net is a negative 845,000, which is 738,000 better than budget.
This is 6 months, right?
This is 7 months.
7 months, I'm sorry, 7 months into the, all right.
Yeah. So you got capital expenditures, 6.8 million, debt service principal, 655,000, and then to date, cash, we have paid the GA
Oh, that
16,691,540.
makes me choke every time I see that, especially at 13.6 million. Yeah, our customer is absorbing every penny of that.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
yeah.
we've got to be sympathetic with our customers. They put up with an awful lot.
and maybe this isn't the time to say, it, I think our goal and what we're doing is we know regardless of what happens with the adjudication, any kind of physical solution, there's still going to be some charge for water usage. So something's going to happen. But in my heart, I believe this, it isn't going to be that much that it's going to go to our customers. It's going to be way less than
We're
that.
getting something out of it.
Yeah, yeah. Plus they'll get some,
This is just
yeah,
wasted money. So as far as I'm concerned.
yeah.
Now, I want to make sure I understand the capital expenditures, that's the total capital expenditures, Ty?
To date, yes.
Now, for the last 6 years, for one reason or another, I've always assumed that the cash capital expenditures were included in the non-operating miscellaneous. And I think last week or the week before, you told me that it was not.
Right,
Is
right.
that correct?
That is correct. The capital expenditures has all our capital expenditures.
Okay, so when we look at these numbers, revenue and expenses, it doesn't include all of the expenses.
It does because capital expenditures are not technically an expenditure.
They're not in,
Oh,
it's
well,
capital, not
It's
expense.
a capital asset.
Yeah, it's a
yeah.
capital asset,
And-
not
and-
expense.
asset, but
The way
Well,
you
the cash-
expense capital expenditures is through depreciation.
Right.
yeah, but from a cash flow standpoint, for year to year, and if you look at the pro forma, it's included in there. If we say we have a balanced budget, then that includes the cash capital. Is that correct?
I don't understand what you mean by balanced budget with cash capital.
Well,
I
okay,
don't-
the.
What we
the-
try to
the-
do is we typically,
The capital expenses that come out of the operating budget or the rate fees, it has to be included in here. I guess I don't understand why it's not,
so,
or why it doesn't need to be, I guess.
So what I do when we develop the budget, we look at the depreciation number and then I look at what the net increase or decrease is. If you have a net decrease in your budget, so like that negative 1.3 million, I take that out of depreciation and that's what our capital budget is as far as non-debt finance capital budget is for that year. That way you get a balanced budget. Yeah.
Well,
That's standard, correct?
no.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what our auditors would
Well,
expect to see.
I think, I mean, we'll be seeing our audit, I
Yeah.
think, on Monday, but in my mind, we have two separate issues. One is cash flow, and the other one is, what is it? Assets, total capital assets, or actual value, whatever they call it. And obviously, the depreciation affects our total assets. But if you're going to spend rate money out of the budget, I guess I can't see how we can't add that in there, or we don't add that in there.
I have no clue what you're talking about, Stan. And I don't.
Sorry.
Yeah, he doesn't know either. You know, I don't know what you're saying.
Well,
I
okay,
really honestly
well,
don't know what you're saying.
If we.
Are you saying something's not accounted for on here?
Oh, yes, yes, and
And so what isn't
the-
accounted for on here?
That is the capital expenditures that come out of the annual rate fee budget.
So what you're saying is that if for instance, we've taken in $10 million in revenues, that a certain part of that may have been spent on capital projects. Is that what I'm understanding you're wanting to know? So, because there's capital projects where being paid for by grants and other things. And then there's capital that they may do that comes directly somehow out of this expense budget that has to get
Yes.
moved into capital. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, capital expenditures includes all capital. That's rate funded capital as well as the grant funded and the bond funded.
Okay.
Right, but the thing, in my mind, the capital funded budget comes from loans,
Right. Bonds,
grants,
whatever, yeah.
Fees paid by the customers early on, and then we're using it, assessment fees, et cetera. But if we're going to have a zero cash flow at the end of the year, the money that we spend on capital improvements needs to be included in this this line. I guess I don't see how you can not include it.
Can you figure that one out,
It
Ty?
is an
All-
expense.
All capital is in that $6.87 million. That capital is accounted for right there.
But no, I mean, I understand that, and I'm certainly not arguing with that.
Then I don't understand what I'm missing.
Then if we have a budget and we have revenue and expenses, and one of the expenses is capital expenditures coming out of the rate budget, I don't see how you can ignore putting them in here.
I still don't understand. I think maybe this is, if you're looking at actual expenditures versus income in your expense income sheet, and you're spending some part of your income on capital, why isn't it under this expense column somewhere? Or is it? You see what I'm getting at? So in other words, you may have it under capital expenditure. Let's just say of the capital expenditures to date of $6.8 million, that 100,000 of it was paid for by something out of our revenues.
Yeah, and that's why we show the depreciation because,
That's why, yeah, it's depreciation, okay.
yeah.
So it shows up-
Depreciation is not part of.
Well, I
cash flow.
no, I realize that, but
Yes, this isn't a cash flow.
The net
Yeah.
This isn't a cash flow report. This is revenue versus expenditures.
right.
All right, why don't we move on? I don't think we're getting.
Yeah,
any
I don't think we're on the same page. I'm having,
No,
I'm
we're
all
not.
over what you're saying and try to figure out what I have, but I just don't know. I'm not sure what you're looking for. Again, if it's modifying the way we do our finances and presentations and how he does the books and everything, I'm not going to go there. That's up to Ty. Our responsibility as a board member is to see that we're fiscally healthy. And that's what I look for.
So
Yeah.
I was going to ask, if we could turn the page. So Ty, you missed a board meeting and I got to embarrass myself by pointing out that red lines were bigger than green lines because I didn't know what was going on. So
Yeah,
I'm going to ask you some questions about these graphs that follow.
I apologize. I was on my deathbed.
I
No
totally
excuse.
understand. It gave the board an opportunity to see my lack of fiscal understanding of your graphs. So the first one on the top there, that seems fairly explainable. It's, the red line is how much our expenses are, and the blue line is how much our revenues are. And we can see that, in general, we have been, spending more than we have been taking in revenue up until this January, where at this point in time, we seem like the revenues are starting to surpass our expenses. That's pretty much what the story we're telling there, correct?
This is this year's. Yes, so yeah, it's month by month in the first, comparing month by itself, revenue in that month and expenditures. And the second one is the cumulative. So we finally passed the, the second one is looking at January revenues versus previous year's January's.
Okay.
Sorry. It's the third one that's the cumulative,
The third what?
Third graph.
the third graph.
Okay, so the second, well, let's just go to the second graph. The second graph is sort of overall in 2021, we collected more than we spent. In 22, we were pretty close. And in 23 and 24, we spent more than we collected. That's pretty much what that graph tells us.
Yeah, what's interesting is the jump in revenue for January and
But it's just January.
But in that
24 versus
2025 column, that's just
25.
January.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
So we had a jump in revenue
it's all-
compared to the previous
It's-
years.
All these are just January. Every
Yes.
spot on this, yeah, this is just the
Oh, these are just
January
Okay.
performance. Right.
These are cumulative. That's why I'm trying to make sure.
Right.
Okay, so these were January comparisons. So
Right.
January of 2023, we had, okay. So then you go to the next one. The third one is sort of the annual. So it looks like in 2020, we spent more than we brought in by a little bit. And then we were pretty even in 21. And then you see this trend from 22, 23, 24, and 25, where our expenses have seemed to systematically exceeded our revenues by some small amount, which is going to have an impact on the district in the long run. Is that correct?
Well, what it's showing is typically at this time of the year, we're always chasing the expenditures. We haven't brought in as much revenue as expenditures.
So this is the same period of time from the previous, this isn't,
7 months.
Yeah, 7 months in
This
the
is 7
previous
months.
years, yeah.
okay, what does that, okay, I guess at some point I'd like to see what that looks like historically for like,
Because we're always kind of chasing expenditures till we get to the very end of the year.
okay.
And then that's when we
So that means
play
our,
catch up.
so we're fairly typical then compared to other
Oh.
years, is what this says.
I'd like it to be the other way, because we've been doing budgets in the negative, which
Yeah.
we're not.
So I guess if you wanted to
Covering
look
that
at the, like, sort of, what do we look like over the last 5 years overall, we would look at the June report.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's,
Could-
it's a good thing I didn't try to explain this with real time in the board meeting, because I would have really, my answer was better.
Yeah. May I ask, where does the majority of our revenue come in? See, I was always thinking that we start on July 1, and those July, August, September are the hot years, and we should be pumping the most water, so therefore, we should be getting more than the average amount of monthly revenue
Yeah.
those 3 months. Is that,
Yeah, in the summer, so our big months will be sales for June, July, August, and a
Yeah.
little bit of September. September is usually pretty good
but
too.
June is last fiscal year, so you can't,
Right, so that's revenue we receive in July that we then have to accrue back to June, the previous fiscal year.
Yeah, the end of the year is always tough because what we're looking at, we don't really see the final until everything's accrued over.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you, Ty. Maybe I'll do better next time.
I'm not going to ask you to change anything on here, but it'd be interesting to see what this would look like if we just took out the GA fee income and out, in expenditure, just pull them out to the side and don't have them within here. What is our root,
Yeah.
it's okay what you're doing because I can see that in my head because basically the money we take in for the GA pretty much goes out for the GA.
Yeah, almost, yep.
Yeah, almost. It just depends on when you calculate.
Spend
Okay.
a little bit more than we bring in.
Yeah, that's just a big number.
Yeah.
It's a big number.
I would like to bring up a previous thought, going back to this sheet here, Ron, the very
Yeah.
front sheet, where it shows us behind $845,000. And again, the budget was developed based upon having a 1 million or a 1.3 million benefit increase in the black. And this shows us
No,
in the
no,
red.
no, it wasn't.
It was the other way. We weren't
Yep.
covering all of our depreciation.
Right.
It was a negative budget, negative 1.3 net.
So in general, we expected in the budget that we proposed that our revenues would be about 1.3 million less than our expenditures in 2025.
Yep.
So the projection was we would take in 1.3 million less than we had to pay out. That was our projection.
No, the other way around, I think.
No,
No, Ty just said that's the way it was.
there's a negative budget.
We were assuming that we were going to take in $1.3 million more
No,
than we were going to take.
the other way around.
Less, that's what spurred the rate study, the rate update.
Yeah, that's the reason we did a rate study is because
No, I meant, I went back, well, maybe that's why the 1.0 and 1.3 is different. I went back to the June budget. And I'm pretty sure it came up with a improvement of $1 million. But I'll go back and check. I don't,
Yeah,
no
well,
point.
well, it's right here, but we budgeted negative
this agreement here.
net revenue decrease of
I'm not sure
1.3
why.
million.
Why we would approve a budget that was 1.3 million, would take away $1.3 million of our revenue.
right, so Stan, that's the first column. That's the 2025 budget, and the 1.3 is, the negative 1.3 at the beginning is what we assumed we would lose out of our reserves over the course of the year. Is that correct, Ty?
Not necessarily losing the reserves. That's why we have such a small capital outlay for this year, just so that we didn't have to go into our
Oh,
reserves.
okay. And part of that was, the depreciation being, yeah, the depreciation wasn't in the approved budget. So
Yes, it
that would
was.
certainly pull everything
The
around.
the approved budget included the depreciation.
Pardon?
The approved budget included, we always budget and finance our depreciation.
Correct.
Stan, are you thinking
Yes, we
that,
do. I'm looking right at it.
are you thinking that the board,
No. Back in June, what we approved.
Yeah, it's right here, the 2025 budget.
Okay.
Okay,
Let's
I'm-
talk about it offline.
Yeah, okay.
Stan, are you thinking that the board approved, Stan, are you thinking that the board approved last year's budget at a 1.5, I'm just using arbitrary numbers, $1.5 million shortfall? We only ended up at a $500,000 shortfall, therefore we did $1 million better than budget? Is that what you're asking?
No, he's looking at this year's budget.
Or, well, you said June, so June's last year.
I think we're probably wasting time here. So thanks for,
Okay.
I'll follow up on it.
All right.
Fearless leader.
Yeah, okay. On to accounts payable disbursements. Took a quick glance through this again.
Yeah, let me know if you have any questions on they're all pretty routine.
Yeah, as I can see. Short list for the first one there. Aqua, meters. And of course, these are all checks that go out the door, including ones that are capital projects, all the money coming from the capital fund as well. Yeah.
I believe that the
Okay.
Edison bill is that the 54,468? That Edison, am I looking across that line correctly? So,
Are we going on to page 2? Is that what?
yeah, I was on page 2, and I was just going to ask if we've seen a noticeable increase from Edison due to the outage we've had at the solar fields.
Yeah, it's been about 20,000 a month more.
Ooh,
Yeah.
it's really that much.
Not a month, I'm sorry.
Total.
Total over the year.
So about $20,000 over the course of 7 months, so it could be $30,000 to $35,000 over the course of a year,
Yeah.
perhaps, just from the loss of those. Okay, so that's a good metric to sort of keep in our heads as we try to figure out ways to prevent these
Right.
thefts from occurring, and we have to pay for repairs. So, the damage is gonna cost us 35,000-ish a year.
It'll be
additional.
interesting the next few months because we're getting to that sweet spot of where solar is, doing really well. It's cool, but it's a little sunnier
Right.
and our production's going to start going up. So we'll see what the real loss is there.
Oh, is it gonna be, it could be more significant than that is what you're saying?
Yeah, we'll track it.
Okay, so.
Insurance wise, any recoup of that loss?
Yeah, but we don't want to file the claim and
Right.
start working on the project till we have.
Yeah,
something
so
to
eventually
protect
maybe
it.
we'll have a claim that will bring some money back. Okay.
Yeah, we gotta make
Right.
it as burglar proof as we can.
Yeah.
first.
Nothing looks out of the ordinary to me.
The Southern California Edison, is that due to the solar being not totally operational?
The amount of
Yes.
it is,
Yeah,
yes.
35, so far this year, we've lost about $20,000. Well, we've paid $20,000 more in electric bills because of those solar panels being out to date in this year.
Okay.
That's why I was asking, whenever we file our final insurance claim, if we can actually
Oh.
squeeze that in there, maybe get some of it back. I don't know.
I don't know about generation.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know about generation either, yeah.
If you
Just
were
repair.
trying,
Oh,
wouldn't
of
it?
course he's gonna try, yeah, yeah. All right. Let's see what else I have here. 1, 2, 3. I don't have any other questions on these. They're, like I said, they're pretty much standard.
So page 3 is okay. As far as I'm concerned anyway.
Eagle Aerial, that's the analysis of our,
Conservation is. way of
yeah,
life.
conservation, way of life, type of thing. Is that a one-shot deal?
No, that's an every year deal.
I'm sorry, well, it's every year.
Annually.
That's what I meant, yeah. It's a yearly amount, okay.
Yes.
Will that always be there? At some point, will we settled in, or is something we need to look at
Yeah,
and update all the time?
it's an interesting story. So in instance, there's a private company that has convinced the state to make essentially the data that they collect a requirement for water districts in one sense. Now, you could try to collect it in a different manner, but they sort of have this proprietary
right.
sort of system. So-
Yeah.
So it's really odd. So there's not a requirement. The state says you have to use Eagle Aerial, but they're kind of the only option out there. Is that correct, as I understand it? So we're kind of stuck. The state says you have to collect this information. They're the only ones that really offer that service at this time. So we're kind of stuck paying for it
Is that the
indefinitely until
airborne
we.
Part of it,
I-
the airborne.
Yeah,
issue?
Yeah, and so it's
It's an unfunded state mandate, even though
And
we're not
it
paying the
supports
state.
this
Yeah.
private corporation. I mean, it would be nice if we could find a better way to, maybe we can buy our own giant drone and do it ourselves, but that might be.
And
a
it's
bit
yearly. The state
much.
requires updating yearly on this
I would
information.
think that it ought to be the state's responsibility to find a competitor. Finance a No, seriously.
You would think the state wouldn't,
Wouldn't force us into
Wouldn't
a
force
sole
it.
source
Yeah, it's a-
situation.
yeah,
Federal government won't allow us to go to a sole source
yeah,
in
no, and
any
that's-
situation.
yeah, we feel like there's a pretty significant conflict there in the way it was done. but
And not
we're
just
at the-
conflict. I mean, if you look at where we are, a yearly one is almost not telling us much. I mean, if you're in an area that's developing constantly and stuff like that, I could see that. But we're out here where you don't have
Well, do they-
massive developments going on and change in the landscape. So yearly, I wish there.
Well, they don't even, they fly it once every 5 years.
Yeah, so
the
we're, in essence,
Oh,
we're
I
not even
But
paying
we're
for
still
the
getting paid,
flyover.
but we're still paying yearly.
We're paying for access to their database and their
So
system.
each time they fly over, it's it's basically this, you say every 3 years they fly, every five? Five. So $150,000 every time they
Yeah,
fly.
but Renee, like, could
Ah.
you possibly generate the data that's needed without that system?
No, I'm not saying we should. I'm just,
So, and so like, so we're kind of stuck.
another,
And they have a lock on it because they won the contract with the state to
State.
do the work.
exactly.
And then they turn around and sell you the service.
They sell you the service.
So-
It is, yeah.
Great
so-
business model.
so-
I'm just getting frustrated because there's another state mandate that we have to pay for.
Yeah,
Period.
and it's yeah, and
So
it's,
what's new?
Yeah, I know.
You basically pay $33,000 a year to get a conservation as a way of life report.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
All right. Well, I don't want to go there. I'll just get frustrated and.
It's worth pointing out, though. I mean,
All right.
it's good that our staff points these things out to me because I kind of go like, what the heck is going on here?
So at this point, I recommend approval of the accounts payable disbursements. Ty, Stan, do you agree?
What is the SWRCB accounting office?
That is the state forcing us to pay them money every year to be a water agency, to regulate us.
65,000?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it went up. It was under 60,000 last year, so yeah. keep-
Only.
Yeah. It's based on number of connections you have. Yeah,
And
yeah. We're paying the regulators to regulate us.
And
Uh,
the Rambo one up here for 29, is that going down or is that staying steady or is it going?
they keep billing us.
Well, I
Some
guess
months
what
it's a
I'm
little more.
interested in is
This is probably one of the lower months.
Lower, okay. Well, if it keeps going down, I guess I won't argue. Yeah, I'll go along with
recommend to pay our bills.
Suggest that we
Yes,
pay the bills.
I think that's a good idea. All right. With that, if there's no comments anymore, future agenda items, I'm just going to mention some, I'm not sure we want to do this, Ty. It just came to mind now, and I don't want to put work on you by a long shot. But it would be interesting to know a number of unfunded state mandates that we're paying for. And whether it be, probably yearly is the best, in any given year, like that cost, the cost for the flyover thing, the cost, it's
So
got to be
Take
for,
about half our budget.
yeah, you could start out with chlorination and arsenic
Arsenic,
treatment
it's-
and
And
to me, it's a public, how can I say, relations thing, that if the public could more understand about what's burden is put on us by the state, that we would not have this cost, that would go a long way in the public understanding rates and why we do what we do. So it's what, I'm not requiring it, George, in any way, shape, or form. It's just, I'm sticking it in your guys' heads that would go a long way when it comes to rate discussions where people would say, by the way, do you know what the state requires? Of course, you're going to have people like Mike Neal that said, well, just don't pay it. Yeah, like you said it perfectly. We're paying regulators to regulate us. God, I hate that.
No. Does Aqua, George, in your mind, you're starting to get involved with Aqua. Do they do adequate pushback on all of this crap that we pay for
I think they do.
from the state government?
I know they have different working groups all the time trying to push back against regulations coming out from the state,
yeah, there's
new propositions or any of that stuff.
I would say that's a mixed bag of stuff, depending on what the regulation is. I haven't seen significant pushback on things like, some of the EPA's, contaminant list that we've talked about in some other meetings and, like, why do we need?
Federal requirement. And then there came the lead service line inventory.
That's
All
right.
that stuff came down from the
Yeah,
federal
but
government.
That's
but
another
Aqua
thing
should
that-
be dealing with federal stuff too. I mean, they're the California water, it doesn't mean just what we get from the state. It should be federal. They have people in DC as
Mhm.
regulators as well. So I can't say that, I see a lot of that. I know that they seem very supportive of things that allow us to generate more revenue. But that's not something which means, they were very supportive of things that made the 218 process you're less likely to get sued, or you're less likely to have a protest. And it's a mixed bag in terms of what you see when there's new regulations that fall under what we'll call the public health and safety
Yeah.
net.
Yeah. Well, 218 actually has been good for us.
Oh, yeah.
But unfortunately, it's also good for the GA. And I don't see how in the world they can
No.
buy with charging people for something they're not.
Let's go ahead and we'll adjourn this meeting so we can get offline if you want to have a short discussion. We can let you have something else, Stan.
Last comment, you were going to provide us with a more recent resolution on the reserve issues?
Yeah. I don't remember which one it was. It's
I
been a
couldn't
couple of
find
years ago.
I know I've seen stuff
Yeah.
like that, but I couldn't find it in our archives.
Yeah,
Our
I'll get that to
website.
you.
All right. Anything else? So we'll adjourn at 3:56.